welcome to the Minority Report Nigeria. I am Chidozie.
And Walter.
Of late in the media, there has been a lot of talk around rape and sexual violence and sexual abuse and harassment and all of that. And sadly, it's been so far just talk.
Just talk.
Yeah. And obviously, this has been a very triggering period for a lot of people who have experienced sexual violence. And it's also in a community like the LGBT community, there is this issues talking about sexual violence, which is already a taboo topic, on its own, is compounded, by this other element of it occurring from between two people of the same sex, where the perpetrator, both the perpetrator and the victim of such instances of sexual violence or harassment and all whatnot are, people of the same sex. It makes it a lot more difficult to talk about. There's an added layer of secrecy and shame and guilt and all of that. And, I have heard a lot of, these sort of instances of sexual violence are very rife, particularly in like the Nigerian fashion industry. I've heard a lot of horror stories.
Yes.
But
it's very disturbing, in fact, because, like he said, there are two things, especially when it regards the LGBT community. There are two things to be doubly ashamed of: the issue of the sexuality and the issue of the violence. So, the need to be silent, to not say anything, becomes doubly impressed on the victim, and that's just troubling. But on it, that's really the point. The focus of this episode really is this, what the victims have to deal with, this trauma that victims have to deal with, and how different ways really that victims deal with the trauma, and how they're able to cope with it, how they're able to move on from it, how they're able to live with it. And these conversations about sexual violence and rape, I remember it came to a head, especially after Busola Dakolo came out to talk about how she was raped by the pastor of Koza Church, Pastor Fatoyimbo. And it's very upsetting, really, that the go-to, and this rape, according to her, the rape happened when she was a child, 16, 17, I think, and now she's a grown woman, and that's when she's talking about it. And it was very troubling to think about how Nigerians, there was this expectation. I don't understand how people are able to say, why didn't you speak sooner? Why didn't you say something then? Why are you saying it now? Why are you even speaking now? You just want to ruin his life and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking,
the sheer empathy of it all, the way people are so quick to
I'm thinking,
empathize.
okay, I'm thinking in that spectre of a moment that you believe that she was raped, but she should not be speaking now because she supposedly wants to ruin his life. I'm thinking, but what about her life? What about what things she had to go through, the demons she had to go to carry along for all those years? And that really speaks to what we want to interrogate here, that the issue about trauma and how different individuals handle it, and the space, the latitude they are supposed to be given to handle it. I had an especially troubling phone call conversation with a friend of mine. He's young, and he, for a long time as a child, he was sexually abused by people who were connected to his family. From an auntie to an uncle to family friend, a stretch of people. He wrote, we talked about it a couple of years ago, and he was able to tell the story. And I remember being so infuriated by what I was listening to, especially because this was something he had to be dealing with on a regular basis because the latest abuser was someone so connected to the family that he was somebody he would be seeing a lot often. I had to clarify first that he had cut off ties with him, and he was like, "Yes, that's actually why he's able to tell the story because he had ended things with him." And so we were doing a lot of talking, and I remember feeling like, okay, you know what, we need to go and confront this man. We need to go and show him, like, call what he has done by his name. We need to like be in his face and all that. And he wasn't ready for that. He didn't want to do that. And my initial, although albeit it wasn't something I let him see, but my initial reaction to that was like, well, why? We should do this. We should do this, you know. But I've come to realize that he had to deal in his own way. He had to deal with that, and if I felt like confronting him, I felt like letting him, not go on with his life and possibly to another victim, thinking that there was something right and just about because there's an absence of um, a knowledge of what you're doing, an actual knowledge of what you're doing is the kind of bliss that some of these abusers tend to operate with when you're not confronted with, oh, this is the damage you're doing. When it seems in one corner of your mind that you're having some sort of conversation, oh, this is nice, this is cool, this is what me and him are enjoying. It tends to push, it is a bliss they need to continue operating. So I feel like, you're doing an injustice. We need to confront it. But, after a while, I realized I had to step back and be like, okay, but ultimately, this is about him and not about any other possible victims that a man might move on to. This is about him. He doesn't have to be responsible for anybody else but his own pain. So we all those years ago, a couple of years ago, we were talking and we were building, his we're sort of like interacting and helping him um, deal with that pain. But then a few months we didn't talk so much. But from his online activity, I could see that he was doing well. And then a few days ago, he calls and he had apparently heard music that he used to listen way back then when he was a child and that was going through that abuse. And somehow that music had held a relevance in his mind of pain and torture and helplessness. And suddenly it was there and he was spiraling and he didn't know what to do and he was sad. And, we had a long conversation where I tried to impress on him the need to change the narrative of what hold the music has over him. You know, the point really is I every time most times when I it's unfortunate to say, but in the capacity of what I do, I have come in touch with a lot of victims of sexual abuse, and there is no one way to deal with all that pain.
No one size fits all.
There's people, you follow everyone according to the pace that they want to go. Because, like, unlike this friend of mine, there are those who are angry, those who want to scream, really, and then there are those who just want to be quiet and contemplative in their pain. And there's a way to follow each of the pain, and so it makes it very problematic when people say, in reaction to a victim coming out to tell his story or her story about being victimized by a sexual abuser, and you talk about how you feel they should have handled it. Why didn't you come out sooner? Why didn't you scream? Why did you sit there and enjoy it? Why didn't you tell anyone? Why, things like that just makes
But
it.
and it's ludicrous to me because, okay, I am coming out now and I'm saying this. What is your reaction to my coming out now? Right? Why didn't I say this several years ago? Would your responses have been different if I'd said it several years ago? Right? When your impulse first is to have all this empathy, to sympathize with the perpetrator, with the abuser, with the rapist. Oh, you're about to ruin his life. He has built his life from the ground up and stuff. Oh, look at all the flock of people he's hurting. What will happen to them? Wow. So you would rather have somebody in a position of power, right, who would, flagrantly abuse that power, who would rape and abuse young, vulnerable people. You'd rather have him in that position to keep doing that so long as you can, that pedestal is still there and you can still revere him. Like you don't want, rather than interrogate the image you have of this person in your mind, you want everything else to work around the image you have of this person in your mind.
And speaking of image and the identity of the abuse of the victims, there's also like in keeping with who you empathize with the in the LGBT community, when it's a man to a man or a woman to a woman or a man to a woman who is believable, or a man to a woman who leads a certain lifestyle that does not inspire empathy, it's really important to set aside whatever.
But sorry, I think that point, sorry for cutting you, but I think that point begs to be clarified. There is no lifestyle that does not, inspire empathy. It's just that, there are certain instances, the idea of having been this perfect victim, right, is designed just so, we will not deal, it's a distraction, just so we don't deal with the issue of this person being victimized.
That's the point.
Yeah, I understand, but it begs to be clarified. Then a person is bringing up, but you wore a really short skirt, and what were you doing there by that time of the night? As though there's any dressing a person could possibly have on, or there is a place you should, a place a person could possibly be that would justify rape or any sort of sexual violence.
I remember a story a few years ago where the man raped a young boy, and I think it was on one of these blogs. The man raped a young boy, and when this is the reason he gave that made him get off, was he said that the boy seduced him. And what lends credence to this reason is this young guy, he tends to dress in very tight fitting clothes, he's very flamboyant and all that. And so people were like, oh, yeah, it makes sense that, he called out on himself, he seduced the man. And it's just the idea of someone who deserves empathy, or someone whose trauma is respected and someone whose trauma isn't, is ridiculous. And it's insane, really, because first of all, you have to, when somebody identifies a pain, I just find it a feeling in the society and a feeling in humanity that the instinct is to question the victim instead of,
like, what did you do?
Exactly.
What were you doing? Like, we already have, an action that should occasion any questions that spring up, and that action is certainly not what the victim was doing or not doing. What was the perpetrator doing?
Like, can we switch around
Like
the
that should be the
questions?
focus. This person is being accused of doing something. The question should then be: did this person do it, or did this person not do it? Right. That should
Yeah,
be the framing
really.
you expect.
But-
But then, rather than it's like, oh, you like innocent even when proven guilty. We are going to then concentrate on the person who is making the claims of having been victimized.
You know why?
To then prove
You know why it's even more insidious? Is those questions? You're right. It's like, no, those questions have already sort of set the premise for the perpetrator's guilt.
Yeah.
Like, you recognize that he's guilty, but let's not just let's
Yes.
set that aside first and focus on,
On what you-
on what part what role
you were
played
doing,
here.
because
Okay?
obviously for a person to sexually harass or sexually abuse somebody, the person has to have been asking for it in such a way. Like, this person he wears a suit, he wears designer suits, he's too put together to be the sort of person who would the entire thing is just utterly baffling. And it just makes you this sort of situations, it's almost like you cannot win, particularly if you're a woman and it's a man. There's always that power dynamic. For me personally, in all these things, the thing that drives me mad is, people can be very well-meaning, right? But the road to hell and all that jazz,
Paved with a lot of good intention.
the way people would say such things as, you're not a victim, you're a survivor, you need to stop thinking of yourself as a victim. You're a survivor. It's like, hold up, what? Like can we pause? What are you surviving? We tend to talk about being a survivor as being mutually exclusive from being a victim. And that is just not true. You are surviving because you're a victim. You don't need to tell somebody who has been victimized to survive. That is the human instinct. Like, they will survive. It's their instinct to survive.
Except there are those who don't, because there's certain kind of trauma
Yeah.
that locks that instinct to survive, where the person lives a life that perpetually speaks of giving up.
Yeah, and that's something I want to point out right now, right there. This sentiment right there. It's as though there is one way to survive. Right?
Oh.
There is no one way to survive. Surviving, surviving this violence that the person has had to deal with, or this sort of traumatic experience the person has to deal with, could be, being involved in like self-harming behavior. It could be alcoholism. All of this is surviving. You are surviving this thing that happened to you. There is no, we have this, idea that survival has to be
on a positive track.
Yes, you have to have this beautiful story at the end of the day, right? Like, there is no one way to survive. All of this, including the negative, is surviving.
Okay.
Right? And what drives me mad is trying to draw that dichotomy and a sort of juxtaposition between being a victim and being a survivor. It's almost like, there's a clear line between the two. There's this door, once you open it and you cross, you're no longer a victim, you're a survivor. That's bullshit. In being a survivor, like, from the moment when you experience that thing that traumatizes you, everything you're doing from that point onwards, is survival. Right? It's not this grand, elaborate thing. Yes, part of that survival can be going to therapy. That's a positive way to handle things, to deal with things. It could be going to therapy, but not everybody, to start with, even has the means for all those things. And secondly, not everybody will have their trauma play out in the way that it's they would deal with it in a way that is positive and da 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 da. The question is, what do we as a society, right, do to make this easier for the victims to survive? And I think that definition of victim is really important, because when I'm a victim of something, I'm not the only one involved. There's somebody else, there's a perpetrator, a group of perpetrators, or more than one perpetrator.
Because surviving excludes the perpetrator.
Yes! Like, it's almost like, I need to feel all my feelings. And that whole emphasis on being a survivor is almost like, this whole window dressing thing. Oh, it has happened to you. Just move on with your life. And all the emphasis is on you to do the moving on, but what happens to the perpetrator? What do we do to the perpetrator? Just a second, hang on. Yeah. What do we do to the perpetrator? Like, when the perpetrator is named, what happens to them? Even if they are not named, what happens to the sort of people who commit this acts of violence, this acts of abuse? What do we as a society do to them? It's almost like this this desperate grappling for this sense of like collective innocence. Oh, I've done my good deed for the day. I'm a very nice person. We've all told you you're a survivor, confetti and rice in the air. All is well with the world. Rather than deal with what the root cause is, there is an enabling preponderance of factors that make it easy for people to commit these acts of violence and get away with it. So in telling me that I should survive, hailing me as a survivor, you're not a victim, you're a survivor, what you are really doing at the end of the day is, and it's a natural human thing to do, it's this not wanting to deal with your participation in this society that made this possible in the first place.
Yeah, it speaks to the discomfort.
Yes, nobody wants to have these uncomfortable conversations. So we can all spin it. It can all be a Fela Duratoye thing. You can do it, you can did it sort of situation when you're saying survival. But then when we are talking about victimhood, then it's like, okay, what is our role in all of this? Because when you're talking about a victim, there are definitely other people involved. What happened to those people? And then everybody's looking like crickets. Right? So that emphasis on you're a survivor, it annoys the fuck out of me. You are surviving something. Being a survivor is tied to being a victim. They're not mutually exclusive. Like, every single day you are alive, after that traumatic experience, you are surviving that experience. There is no sort of like right way to survive. It's a tricky thing to say, but it's actually the truth. There is no right way to survive. Right? We can't expect that everybody's going to turn out well at the other. Sometimes people, surviving might just be ending your life. Because we live in a fucked up society where nothing happens to people who commit this evil, these crimes. And restitution is a big part of the healing process. You cannot tell me to survive and to heal when there is no repercussion for the sort of action that has put me in this way in the first place. How do you tell somebody to survive and to heal when there's a possibility that this can happen again, and again that person will get away with it? So the whole kumbaya, let us clap and shake hands, oh my god, you're such a survivor, I'm so proud of you, like, sit the fuck down with that bullshit. It comes off to me like people just, and I don't think I know it comes from a good place, right? I know it comes from a good place, and it's like, I think it's a human thing. These conversations can be difficult to have, but it's important to have them. And I think it's really ludicrous to keep, like pushing people. Don't think of yourself as a victim, think of yourself as a survivor. They are surviving.
Basically, trying to control the trauma of the victim. Whether it's well-intentioned or whether it comes from a place of not deliberate misunderstanding, it's or whether it comes from a place of your sense of culpability in that situation, whatever it is essential to understand that the pain is the victim's, and that pain has to be addressed, not hushed, not carried along, not hurried along, not told to move on already. You know, the and it's essential to understand that different people handle pain differently. I like to say, I actually got this enlightenment today because I always have this impression that surviving pain, surviving trauma, requires it's about acquiring strength to move on up, you know, as opposed to spiraling downward, you know. But it's in the interest of a sound and strong society that people are encouraged. You know, the trajectory of survival
Yeah,
is
yeah. But my point is, it's that's wonderful. Encourage people to survive in a way that's positive and all of that. But also hold the perpetrators of this act of violence accountable. You cannot; those things are not mutually exclusive,
yeah.
right? While you can encourage people, oh, you need to, you probably need to see a therapist and da 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 da. You know what would really help? To see that there's some form of punishment. It's not going to change what has happened, but it would help victims of this crimes to feel safer, knowing that there are actual consequences for this sort of thing. Do you know the sort of terror? Can you imagine the sort of terror a rape victim has to live with, knowing that it can happen again? Have you even and nothing will happen? Have you seen the statistics on the amount of rape cases that have been tried in Nigeria, for example?
I heard some number 8 or so,
My goodness.
and it's unbelievable that these are these are things people do and are comforted by the fact that they can easily get away
Yes,
with
and
it.
then you're coming to tell me, you're not a victim, you're a survivor, love and light. Fuck you with your love and light. Like, can you deal with the important issues, the structural issues? And that whole thing about you're not a victim, yeah, it sounds really, all those sort of cookie cutter, bullshitty, cheaper by the dozen, wholesale sentiments. They're all honky dory and sweet, wonderful, fine. But victimhood is tied in with survival, right? You're not surviving nothing, you're surviving something. And I think it's important to like that whole thing about who is the perpetrator, or who are the perpetrators, what are the consequences, what happened to them. You know, you can't keep telling people will survive, survive, and then you feel, oh, I've done my good deed for the day, oh, I'm such a nice person. Halo, halo. Ooh. No.
Well, we where we I don't know what to say because if you're watching this and you are a victim or you're surviving your pain or your trauma, the world is not shit. I'd like to believe. I like to believe that there are who people who like us are out there understanding, and I want to believe that such people exist in your life and they are there, they are nurturing you, they are walking with you at the pace you are going or willing to go. Um, to all victims of sexual assault and sexual violence and rape, do we say be strong? It just
Survive.
survive.